Today we've got some, I guess we could put it this way. It's Japanese showtime. So being a colonial power, of course, requires occasionally putting on a good show, right? For maintaining that prestige. And it's for both the colonized and for the home population to see that they're doing a good job and that everything's running smoothly. And ruling a foreign people does carry an inherent responsibility. You're supposed to be bringing progress and order, right? You got to justify it.
The Taiwan History Podcast, Formosa Files, is made possible through the generous sponsorship of the Frank C. Chen Foundation. Formosa Files.
So Japan, as Taiwan's colonial master at that time, was keen to show the world that it had become a major power. It was ready to take its place with the other colonial powers. And to show how awesome they were, they wanted to point to Formosa, their first colony, acquired in 1895, and say, look at this beautiful success. So, John, you told me that a good way of understanding this story is to look at the Japan-British exhibition of 1910.
Yes, strange for us today, but exhibitions, in particular world fairs, were once big events.
Right.
Immensely popular. Enormous effort went into showcasing a country's achievements and also companies, private companies.
Right. The Eiffel Tower would be a great example.
Yeah. Built for the 1889 World Fair held in Paris, of course, the highest man-made structure at the time.
They were going to take it down after the fair, but it ended up being popular, so it's still there. But anyway, from the name, the Japan-British exhibition, we can guess doesn't really sound like a world fair.
No. It's mostly a Japanese event, their largest ever overseas presence by far. Britain provided relatively few exhibits, but the site is in London, and they had hosted exhibitions there the previous years.
The hosts could use the buildings then that were set up for these.
Yep. But the Japanese went to great expense, bringing in Japanese gardens, temples, various structures. It was held from mid-May to late October in 1910. So it's nearly 5 months. The driving force for the Japanese was to improve their image and also promote trade, particularly manufactured goods, and to advertise their new status as a great power.
I was just going to comment about the price tag, and I was going to assume that the British didn't pick up most of that and that it was the Japanese that were piling money into this. So what was the Taiwan or the Formosa connection there?
Numerous exhibits on Taiwan, including displays of steamships, railways, the camphor industry, hospitals, a model of Kaohsiung Harbor. And there were 2 tea houses at the exhibition, one for Japanese tea and one for oolong tea.
So that would be, of course, oolong tea from Taiwan. And how did that go down? We're talking about British people drinking Taiwan oolong tea. How did that work out?
Well, there were plenty of visitors to the Formosan tea house. 250,000 people in total. The Brits, however, didn't have a taste for oolong tea. They preferred it mixed with some Indian black tea.
Okay. Yeah, not surprising, I guess.
And then there was a Formosan village consisting of some traditional native huts stocked with living exhibits. 24 aborigines who did dances and demonstrated some traditional crafts or just sat around on display.
Okay, so let me just get this straight. There was 24 Aboriginal people from Taiwan in these fake villages created for this exhibit, and in some ways they were like a zoo show of Formosan Taiwan. But that's a little counterintuitive. I mean, if you're trying to promote modern Japan, bringing civilization to Formosa and blah, 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 this prestige, it's odd, isn't it?
Well, you're echoing concerns the Japanese officials had at the time, and Japanese citizens resident in Taiwan at the time. The Formosan village was a British idea. That and they also wanted an Ainu hamlet.
So they wanted something more exotic. The Ainu are indigenous people from the northeast Japanese Japanese island of Hokkaido a long time ago, it wasn't Japanese at all. And the Ainu today are much diminished and unfortunately have lost most of their culture and stuff. They speak Japanese. But back in the day, the Ainu were a totally different people.
And there was a traditional Japanese village too, which had traditional rural houses and some peasants giving demonstrations.
Okay, peasants. All right.
Yeah, well, the people manning these areas were, for the educated Japanese elite, too low class. They thought these peasants were creating a bad impression.
Yeah, I can imagine them thinking that this is not quite what we're trying to display. Yeah. So, in general, how popular was this fair with fair goers?
Well, the British organizer was right in terms of wanting these villages. The Japanese-British exhibition was a great success. It got huge numbers of visitors. Oddly enough, the so-called Ainu village, it was just 10 people, 3 huts. The Ainu village was more popular than the Formosan village. Yeah.
Okay. As I noted earlier, the term zoo comes to mind. Were there any concerns about the morality of exhibiting live humans?
Yes, there's criticism from both British and Japanese. Accusations of exploitation. Yeah.
Yeah. But actually, when you think back at that time, having subjects from colonial powers on display wasn't all that unusual.
No, indeed, quite common. The next year at the same venue in London, there was a Maori village from my country of New Zealand.
Right.
And it was one of the popular attractions there. I think the first Taiwanese aborigines to be on display overseas was in Osaka, Japan, about 1903, I think.
So what is known about these Aboriginal people who were at the exhibition? There were 24 of them.
Yeah, they were all Paiwan, most from the Hengchun Peninsula. There were a couple of men who were identified as chiefs, just 3 women, and 2 Japanese policemen accompanied them.
So from Hengchun, that would be today the place where we go to the beach very often, Kending area. So how were they selected? Were they just drafted, or how did that work?
I don't know, but I assume it was voluntary and not coerced.
Why would you assume that?
Well, the colonial authorities wouldn't want embarrassing incidents, people running away. They'd want volunteers. Also, the payment was very generous, $1 a day.
Okay.
And that includes the time spent traveling there and back.
Oh.
This equated to about 3 times as much as what an elementary school teacher was earning.
That is not bad.
Not bad. And on top of that, they've got presents. People would give them money, and they could make money from selling personalized postcards. And they got paid weekly in advance. This was all stipulated in a contract. And there are records that the members saved between 200 to 500 yen. That's equivalent to, many years of savings.
Wow. So, 200 and 500 yen back then was a lot of money. And I'm interested to know how you know all of these stories.
Time travel.
Yeah.
Okay. I read a couple of books on the subject. Special shout out to Lost Histories, Recovering the Lives of Japan's Colonial Peoples by Kirsten Ziomek.
It's amazing the books that are out there on subjects that you would never imagine. It's just, there's so many cool books connected to Taiwan. You list about 100 of the English language ones in your book.
I could have done 300. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Your book is called Taiwan in 100 Books, but you could have done 300. Wow. Yeah. So back to the Paiwan people. This is pre-jetliner travel. It must have been a rather amazing trip for them nonetheless. They get to go to the other side of the world, quite literally.
Yeah, it was overwhelming for them at first. The Paiwan group arrived in London mid-April. They'd suffered from seasickness on the long journey, and they were already homesick when they arrived.
Okay. So they get their land legs and they start to settle in.
No. They wanted to return to Taiwan. They were unhappy with the condition. The accommodation they slept in was not up to the contract standard. The huts were too cold at night.
It's cold in
cooped up. It's mid-April, can't be that bad. They felt cooped up. They're stuck at exhibition grounds. They're bored.
Okay.
Yeah, they want to go back. They're so unhappy. A director makes a phone call back to Taiwan asking about the possibility possibility of them going back. And they were told, to paraphrase, you're supposed to be brave warriors, headhunting badasses, not bedwetting crybabies. So if you come back, you'll be bringing shame on yourself and us.
Okay. And you think London is tolerable in April, but if you've lived your entire life in very southern Taiwan, which like even in September, October is still 35 degrees in the noontime, London is not a pleasant climate for, I get it. I'm on their side on this one. So how did they take the response to toughen up and do your job?
Sullenly, but the mood of the group improved when the weather got warmer.
See, there you go.
You're right. And as their English got better.
They could speak English?
They learnt it while they were there.
Wow.
And they did this by themselves, memorizing English phrases, trying the phrases out on visitors. They made great progress, and it became a point of pride.
I wonder if they went all the way with like Cockney accents with the, So the Ainu village was more popular, you said, but did they get some popularity going? Did the ball get rolling for the Formosan Aboriginal village replica?
Yeah, I mean, yes, the Ainus were more romantic at that time. They're sort of like seen as a dying people.
Okay.
But maybe the Formosan Aborigines, you'd expect their reputation as bloodthirsty headhunters would attract, but it seemed to put people off. Or maybe Formosa was just not as interesting, as well known as Japan. Now, the Paiwan, they had a bit of fun with their image as these savages. They would play it up too, when food was not to their liking or the food was late being served. They would draw their big knives or take their spears and make a scene.
That's great. That's wonderful. Kind of turning the tables a little bit there. Yeah. Okay. So for people who aren't so clear on the different Aboriginal groups, the Paiwan are a lowland indigenous people. And because they've been so close to Han Chinese for a very long time, a lot of influence from China, and they're not from high mountains.
Indeed, but they've as a group, they've got pretty good savage credentials. So you've been to Mudan, right?
Mudan, yes. It's on the east coast side of Pingtung. It's not a very developed area, and there's just this one little town there called Mudan. Yes, indeed, I've been there.
And it's famous for?
The Mudan incident of 1871, when the Okinawan, or more accurately, the Ryukyu seafarers or sailors, they shipwrecked right on the southeast coast there. And sadly, 54 of them got inland and then got killed.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that the Mudan incident, which is the name for this mass killing of the Ryukyus, that it was not Mudan village, but another one.
It's true. I was chatting with a couple of people one time when I was down in the Greater Kending area, and I brought up the Mudan incident and how I was researching it. And somebody said, well, actually, it's not really our village Mudan. It's just because we happen to have the largest village in the neighborhood. But no, they were a little prickly about that.
Okay, so the killers came from another place in the area, a village called Couscous. It had about 250 inhabitants. Guess where most of the Paiwan and the London exhibition come from?
I'm assuming Couscous.
Yes, they're from Couscous. So their granddads had helped bring about the Japanese punitive expedition of 1874, and in turn, led to, in large part, Japan's presence on the island.
Yeah, there's a little bit of irony there. Okay. But these guys are harmless, aside from their weaponry, and they're friendly. If you say that they're learning English, and that means they're interacting with English visitors.
Yes, admirable. For me, this story is a great example of something that you could dismiss quite easily as, racist, this identity, that power dynamic, blah, blah. But it's a very human story of people interacting with others, one person at a time.
And it's a great turnaround from them initially wanting to run back to Taiwan.
Yeah, they would have fond memories looking back at their time in England. And they managed to get excursions out of the exhibition grounds around London. I think they had invitations to people's homes. Lots of great memories, riding the London Underground. Probably the most striking thing they saw was above the exhibition grounds, a box-like contraption in the sky, two men in the box.
An airplane.
Yeah.
That would be something to tell stories of when you got back home. You've got
Yeah.
subway underground. You got planes flying in the air. You're going to be the star of the campfire for quite a while.
Yes, it's worth enduring a bit of cold, isn't it?
Yeah.
Another highlight came for them in August. They met the king and queen.
Oh, so this would be George the
V, recently coronated, grandpa of the current queen. They only spent about 10 minutes at the Formosan village talking to 3 Paiwan women, one of whom was very pregnant.
they brought a pregnant woman with them?
Yeah.
Wow.
She gave birth the following month to a boy.
In Taiwan or in London?
In London.
Wow. When did the group arrive back in Taiwan?
January 1911, they came via Japan, the port of Kobe, and then nearby Osaka, where they were given a city tour. And in Taiwan, they were met by the Governor General.
Right. So this is all ship travel. So
the steamship's about 6 weeks from
6 weeks.
Japan to London at that time. Yeah.
Was there any major follow-up with these people? Do we know anything about their later years?
I'm afraid not. But there is a nice story from the next year, 1912. So a young English botanist by the name of William Price is in Taiwan collecting specimens, and he sent back over 1,000, many of them from an expedition to Jade Mountain, to Yushan.
Okay.
And he even got an orchid named after himself. Not bad. But, he briefly visited the Formosan village in London in 1910. Now he was being invited by them to meet the Paiwan.
Oh.
Apparently, they wanted to show him some return hospitality. They were grateful for the kind treatment they'd received in England.
I'm sure he got to sample some of the local rice wine.
They bought him some foreign beer.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that's very kind of them, I have to say. And obviously, the Japanese would have seen this whole thing as good publicity.
Yes, so they arranged a meeting with 10 of these tribesmen. Price was greatly impressed by their English ability. He hadn't spoken to them at the exhibition in London. Okay, so he's been traveling in Taiwan for months and seldom encountered Japanese who spoke English as well. And he's also impressed by their general bearing and good manners. But they're at dinner. He's sitting here with some Japanese, a couple of policemen, his research assistant, a local schoolmaster, and the 10 Paiwan. But it's kind of embarrassing because these Japanese elite, they're speaking really bad, broken English, and they can't keep up. They're struggling to stay in the conversation. The Paiwan are speaking English very well.
Impressive. They must have, when they returned, they must have gotten some books and continued reading. And impressive. Right. So going back to the subject of exhibitions, these were periodically held also on Taiwan. I recall, not personally recall, but I recall reading of one back in 1935, a rather large one. And the name of that one was the Taiwan Exhibition in commemoration of the first 40 years of colonial rule. And it ran for 50 days. And there was an estimated 1 million people that attended that.
1 million. Whew.
Yeah.
It's a huge number, isn't it?
Massive.
I mean, the population of Taiwan at the time was about 5 million. And, there would be a few visitors from Japan, even Korea, but still the great majority were Taiwanese. So the number represents about 20% of the island's population.
Yeah. And there were 4 different places in Taipei where this took place. Today, it's called Ximending, the area around the 228 Memorial Park. Over up in the north, the Beito Hot Springs area. And then there's Dadaochen, the home to Taipei's oldest street, the Dihua Street. Yeah. And apart from displays from Taiwan at this exhibition, there were also exhibits from Japan, Korea, and Manchuria.
I've seen pictures of the exposition, and it was a forward celebration of development, the glories of empire.
And to be fair, 1935 is roughly around that area is arguably the pinnacle of Japanese rule because it's before all that nasty military excessiveness got out of hand.
Yeah. For me, the high point of colonial rule would be the 1920s, end of the 20s. The great gains had been made in the first 3 decades. 30s, you see the military assert control of Japan's government. On Taiwan, there's more economic exploitation. You can see it in the heights of the people. Taiwanese got much taller through to about 1930, but afterwards, they stalled out.
So for a year of peak colonial Taiwan, Taiwan, seeing as we're talking about putting on a show. How about 1923, the year of the visit of Japan's crown prince? That would mean the heir to the throne of the empire.
Okay, I know the background, but not that much about the details of his trip. It wasn't the first visit of a royal, but yeah, wow, this time was especially lavish.
It was a massive show, or let's say a showa.
Okay, a nice niche history pun there. So the crown prince is the future emperor Hirohito, the wartime emperor.
Mm-hmm. And he rules afterwards until his death in 1989, a very, very long reign.
Yeah, so his reign began 1926 after the death of his 47-year-old father. The era was called Showa. So he's known as the Showa Emperor. So when he visited Taiwan, he was Prince Regent. Okay, so you got rid of your king back in the 1700s.
Well, yes.
You and your fellow American revolutionaries. You might not be familiar with Regent. So as Regent, that means he's actually acting as the de facto ruler. His father was in poor health.
Not only poor physical health, he was reportedly also suffering from some mental illness that probably wasn't talked about very much in Japan or elsewhere. So Hirohito, in effect, was emperor from 1921, and that means he was just 20 years old.
Mm-hmm.
The crown prince arrived at the port of Geelong aboard a warship. That was April 16th, 1923. He was driven past cheering crowds and then got on a private train for the short trip to Taipei, or Taihoku as it was called then. The next thing on his itinerary was visiting the country's most important shrine, the Grand Taiwan Shrine, and that shrine had been built to honor an imperial relative, a rather distant relative. He's got a name that is incredibly hard to pronounce. Kita Shirawi. It's impossible. Yoshi. Yeah.
Prince let's just go with the initials, KY.
Yes.
Okay, so this KY chap commanded the invasion force for the 1895 conquest of Taiwan.
Right.
After 5 months of battles and skirmishes, a lot of moving around and waiting, the conflict ended with the capitulation of Tainan. That's on October 21st. Prince KY died a week later of malaria. And so October 28th, the date of his death would become a public holiday in colonial Taiwan.
So when we say it wasn't the first visit from a royal, the first visit from a royal was the guy who conquered Taiwan.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. And that grand Shinto shrine in Taipei was pretty much destroyed during the Second World War by American bombing.
And a plane crash. A Japanese passenger plane crashed into the shrine after taking off from nearby Songshan Airport. That's in October 44. Now, I've been doing some reading for a podcast episode on Taiwan's aviation history.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think I've heard about that. Crashed into the shrine after taking off from Taipei Airport. Wow. So after the war, the shrine was demolished by the KMT, which is not surprising. And it used to be one of Taiwan's landmarks, but obviously it's a symbol of foreign rule. And that didn't work out well for the nationalists who wanted to begin the new regime. And a rather large edifice does exist on the site where it once stood, and that would be the Grand Hotel.
The Grand Hotel, yeah. So one landmark replaced by another one. The old shrine looks gorgeous in the pictures, at least I've seen. But I have to say, I'm a fan of the Grand Hotel. It divides opinion. I know it's over the top. It's huge, classic Chineseness. It's columns and ornate carved roof and such. But I don't know. I like it. How about you?
I'm with you on that. It's a little bit overdone, overwrought or whatever. But it's kind of pretty. So then from Taipei, our Prince Hirohito traveled in a luxury train south and came all the way down to where I live in Takao, which is current modern day Kaohsiung. He arrived in Kaohsiung on April 21st.
So the old station is still there, right?
It is, yes, but it's not used for passenger traffic. It's but you can visit. So he was driven through Kaohsiung City. He gets to this reception hall. It's a wooden pavilion-like building constructed for him. So he slept there for 2 nights during his stay in the city. But he also got out. He visited what was then called Minato Primary School and went over to Pingtung, which was called in Japanese Heito, and visited a massive sugar mill that had been constructed there.
Okay. Sounds like a successful trip, at least no mishaps on it.
Right. Yeah, that's the general take. He got a good reception, reportedly, from all the Japanese citizens on the island. And then when he got back home, people who followed it in newspapers and saw a film of his trip were also quite impressed. But the Taiwanese themselves don't seem to have been, completely awed or even all that interested.
Yeah. Well, Hirohito doesn't exactly cut a heroic figure.
No, he
for
doesn't.
For a divine being, he looked rather ordinary.
Yes.
Or ordinary, but smaller and more awkward. I mean, he's one of these guys, you could put him on a white horse. It's just going to make him look worse, right?
Yeah. So he spent a lot of time visiting Japanese shrines, and that wouldn't actually be a great way of connecting with the local people because they had not in any way embraced the religion of Shinto. And he also climbed up to the top of Takao Mountain.
I've read that Takao Mountain, what foreigners there call Monkey Mountain.
Right.
If you go back to the Dutch times, they called it Ape Hill. So it has pedigree. Okay. Yeah. So they changed the mountain's name to Longevity Mountain in Japanese, which is Shoshan in Chinese.
Kotobukiyami, Shoshan. April 23rd, 1923, Crown Prince Hirohito departs for the Pescadores or Penghu. Then he heads back to Taipei again, and then finally departs from Geelong on the 26th, bringing an 11-day visit to an end.
Yeah, so a successful trip, but it turned out to be a rough year for the Crown Prince.
Right. You're talking about there was an assassination attempt on him that year. And also Tokyo was pretty much demolished by the Great Kanto earthquake. The quake and fires killed over 100,000 people. And a lot of people in Taiwan may not know that Tokyo City was rebuilt in part by taking a lot of wood, massive timber reserves from Taiwan, as the Japanese had recently opened up forests.
Indeed. The magnificent Alisan Forest Railway had been completed about a decade earlier. An amazing feat. So that goes up from J, not that much above sea level, to 2,200 meters. So forget all the pomp and ceremony of royalty, the big events like the expositions, all the crowds and formalities, the engineering wonders, practical things such as the railways, the irrigation canals, waterworks. For me, these are the real showcases of Japanese rule.
Thanks for joining us on Formosa Files. I'm Eric Michael Smith.
I'm John Ross.
You can contact us with the email formosafiles@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.